Today, the Daily Tea is swapping its teapot for a pint as we speak to the landlord, Andy Lennox, who is so angry about what the Labour government has done to pubs in this country, he's banned those MPs from setting foot in this bar.
Even Prince William has come out in support of the Great British Pub. And the government, Puritans though they are, says help is on the way. But will it be enough to save an industry that is on its knees?
If my pub is an award-winning pub and, being voted Dorset's best pub, and I do 400 roasts on a Sunday, every week, every month, and we turn over about 1.6 million, but I only make 50 grand. Is that my fault, or is that someone else's fault?
Tim, we're in the pub. I can see a dartboard above your left shoulder. We're in the goods yard.
Yes.
In not so sunny Poole. What's happened? This isn't the seaside trip we planned.
But on a horrible day like this, where else do you want to be but a pub, where you can have a real fire, real people, 2 real dogs.
Yes.
And we're drinking out of Poole ware. We're drinking out of Poole ware because we're near Poole, which of course produces fantastic pottery.
Oh yes, we're drinking cups of tea, although the punters around us, because we've assembled some Daily Tea fans who are drinking, I've got to be honest, alcohol, but it is past noon.
It's just gone noon.
So that's all right. And we are here really to do a special podcast marking our Save Our Pubs campaign. The Telegraph has been campaigning to save pubs, which are closing at a rate of 1 a day, at least. That may be a conservative estimate. And we're joined here by landlord Andy Lennox, who has done this extraordinary thing of taking on Labour MPs and saying, frankly, in the style of Peggy Mitchell from EastEnders, "Get out of my pub." Why did you do that? Why did you launch this campaign, which you told me earlier is now being supported by 1,500 landlords?
Yeah, about 1,500 landlords. To be fair, we've kind of lost count now about how many people are actually doing the campaign, and actually that transcends across restaurants as well, into hotels. I think even hairdressers have joined in as well.
So you have barred Labour MPs. How do you know they're a Labour MP? Do you ID people?
I mean, and this is a funny thing, isn't it? It's like, do we have loads of pictures behind the?
Yes.
No.
You should have a row of photos of the cabinet
with crosses across their
barred.
faces, like traitors.
Well, we do have some top trumps that we've started using.
Do you have a Labour MP?
We have a Labour MP in Bournemouth, yes.
Do you know their name?
Yes, so we have a Tom Hayes. So essentially the Ground Zero event was in a place called the Larder House, James Fowler restaurant in down in in Bournemouth. And Tom Hayes, basically the local MP, kind of didn't take too kindly to it and did a video which then went viral. And then we took up the campaign. We launched it into the Old Thatch, my other pub. We launched it here in the Good Yard. And then it just went viral after that.
And tell us, before we get into why you've launched that campaign and what we can all do to save our pubs, tell us a bit about your history. When did you first get involved in pubs? How many pubs have you got? And how has the landscape changed for you as a publican?
So I've been in hospitality since I was 21. So I run a successful chain of restaurants. I then went into pubs, and I've got 4 pubs, and they're all over Dorset, and 1 in Hampshire as well. It's the lifeblood of me. It's what I've always done. I absolutely love pubs. I love hospitality. I love the way that, it's everyone's first job. It's the way that basically you learn your first social skills. But ultimately, it's got harder and harder and harder. And over the last, I think the last time we made any real money was about 2017. And it's just, you're essentially operating now to just pay HMRC. You pay your staff. Keep the doors open, but there's not really much growth there. And you're getting to a stage now where we're starting to look at things which we shouldn't be looking at. Maintenance schedules. You're really down at the absolute brass tack bones of everything now, and we've just kind of said enough is enough.
If you sell a pint, do you have any idea how much of the money you get? What are you making on selling?
14p in a pint. So if I sell a pint for £5.50, we make about 14p.
1-4?
Yeah, 14p.
And where does the money go?
So about, in essence, about £2.40 goes to HMRC and taxation through various different. It's not just VAT, which obviously is the most important one, and the one we'll talk about later. But then throughout your NI, your employers' contributions, your alcohol duties, it just cuts down into your pint. And then obviously you're then paying all your staff, you're paying all of your rentals, you're paying your rates, again, which obviously we'll talk about. But ultimately, when you get down to the brass tacks, it's 14p.
Okay, so this kind of, it's not just a double whammy or even a triple whammy. It seems to be a quintuple whammy of problems Labour has inflicted on the publican. So let's explain it to us like we were in the pub, Andy. First of all, the business rates rise. What impact has that had? What happened? What changed? And why are so many pubs being clobbered by it?
So this is a really interesting one, and it's quite a difficult one to explain, so bear with me. I tried this with my mother quite a few times, and we're still not there. But essentially, we obviously all have rates that we pay. During COVID, that was we got a discount at 75%, and then basically that relief then went to 40%. What's ended up happening is the COVID relief has now left, and it's going to be taken away, which obviously everybody to a certain extent understands that you can't keep on having COVID relief. The government then basically introduced a transitional relief on rates, and they basically said, look, we're going to actually drop your rates down. But what they didn't do was look at the new, they say they didn't, the new VOA. So the new valuation office then doubled pubs' rates. So essentially you had 40% being taken away from you. They then put in transitional relief and put in a new multiple. So you see how this is getting quite complicated. And then essentially, then they doubled the rate. So, for example, the Old Thatch, my other pub, which is where kind of like we started with the pubs in the campaign, that's gone from 32,500 up to 82,500. So essentially, obviously, you don't pay the full 82. There's always a multiple, and this is where it gets even more complicated. You actually pay about, it used to be 49p in a pound. That's now come down to 44p in a pound, but then your rates have then gone up, and so we're actually, in essence, all paying about £20,000 more. So essentially, if you then equate that to pints, there's 100,000 pints that I have to sell.
Okay.
Right.
We also featured a lady who ran a pub who had a 2,000% increase to her business rates.
Right.
So say if you and I were drinking tequila slammers, that's tequila slammer number 1.
Right.
Tequila slammer number 2, I would assume, is this VAT issue. You need to explain that to us again, like we're in a pub, Andy, because we are.
So ultimately, you have it. Well, actually, you then have the employers NI that's coming, and that came in the first budget. So in the first Reeves budget, it cost my company about £350,000. We then basically went back, we re-engaged with Labour MPs, we re-engaged with everyone, we said, look, we cannot take any more taxation. They've obviously then come back with the rates, and this is where we are, and that's why we launched the campaign. But the fundamental problem with our hospitality industry, and this is not just pubs, this is restaurants, this is hotels, this is everything, is our VAT rate is one of the highest in Europe. So essentially, if you look at the average European VAT rate for hospitality, it's 13%. We are at 20%. Okay, you've got the Nordic states at 25%, so obviously that's quite a, but they've only got 6 million people in Norway. So
and they've got like free universal childcare.
Exactly, and but ultimately the average is 13%.
And alcohol's very expensive there.
And alcohol is very expensive.
It's very Protestant.
But then you've had this minimum rate, it is, but you've also had this minimum raise increase of national wage. So it's gone up every year for the last 7 years. And so essentially we are, actually average person in Norway in hospitality gets paid about £12.79, I think. We're now at £12.41. So, think about a pint of a price over in Norway. But VAT, in Europe, they value their hospitality. They see their hospitality as a real career. One of the things for me, I love what I do. I love who I employ. I love seeing, those young people, those 15, 16-year-olds having their first job, and learning their first social skills and all this kind of stuff. We'll go on to that. We can't afford to employ them anymore, which is really, really frustrating. But they value their hospitality, and they see it as a real career, and they have made the taxation correct for that industry. And at 13%, it makes sense. Everything works. And actually, some of them are as low as 5%. So, Spain, I think it's 7%. Ireland, which is our nearest, essential partner, is now going to be 9% as well. And so what we're saying is that we need to readjust how our taxation system works, because ultimately that money goes straight off your pint. Before we've even, so we talk about £5.50, that's 20% straight off that goes to HMRC anyway. Yeah. And it doesn't work. And when your numbers don't work, it really, really becomes a struggle. And so if you look at the pub, for example, we like to think that we could probably make 10, maybe 15%. That's kind of where you want to be. We're now more like 3 or 4%. Wow. And you just can't operate the margins, and it's becoming unsafe, those margins. It's just, there's nothing left to give. And when, you have, for example, people coming to us and saying, we've got applications for jobs, 30 people applying for jobs because nobody is employing. And it's we believe that we're the engine of the economy. And we really do believe that basically we employ 3 million people, massive, massive employer. And we really believe that we are the engine of the economy. And when we're going and when we're doing well, the economy's doing well because everyone's out, everyone's eating. And we're part of everybody's lives. Whatever you do, whether you're having tequila slammers or whether you're having a pint, whether you are commiserating because you've lost your job or you're celebrating because you've just got promotion or you're seeing friends and family, you're having a wedding, a funeral, whatever, it all evolves around hospitality. And so it is kind of the barometer of the nation.
All this extra detail is important because it's possible the government will roll out some sort of U-turn, but it will probably just be focused on one issue, like business rates, right? When it's everything, you're being hit by so much more than just that, and one doesn't want the government to do one thing and give the impression that it has come to its senses, when in fact the industry is being hit by so many different things at once.
And I have to say, we're not going to let them.
Right.
And this is the main thing. The business rates bill coming down the line in April is a bill that we are not paying. We can't afford to pay the bills that we've got. And this is the big, big key thing. You've got a numerous kind of taxation on a pint, etc. And we've got to say, look, the rates bill we're not doing, that we're just not going to do it. And that's where we're at. And that's where we need to get this U-turn. But the really fundamental piece here is to fix the issues in the industry. We must get a VAT cut. We must bring it down in line with Europe. And why can't we bring it down in line with Europe? I mean, we had Brexit, we've had all these numerous things to say, we want to take control of our own taxation and everything like that. Why shouldn't we be the same as Europe?
Yes. One argument for leaving the EU was
that we could do that, and then we didn't.
VAT,
I know.
And we haven't done
that. Was one of the entered into the. It wasn't even called the European Union then, but it was the
common market.
The common market, and they implied VAT, and we had to take that on, and we said, well, actually, we can bring that down. Everyone else has brought it down, apart from us.
It's mental. That's so typically
Ireland
British.
is resolutely in the EU and seems to be undercutting us on tax at every available
and look how
turn.
well they're doing.
Corporation
look how well
tax.
Ireland is doing.
Exactly.
Europeans decide the society they want, and then they frame the tax policy to achieve that. Whereas our governments just try and screw us for as much money as possible. And one reason why I love the focus on barring MPs is because at every election, a politician will visit a pub. At the last election, Keir Starmer, I saw him visit a pub, not far from here, somewhere near Guildford kind of way, a bit norther. And of course he went in and he was uncomfortable. He didn't know who to show his lanyard to, all this sort of stuff. But he does the pulling the pint badly so that it's 9/10 ahead. And all the cameras click, and it's pubs are the engine of the economy. And then they get into office and they do this.
Yeah, they do absolutely nothing. And, look, barring Labour MPs was a bold decision, but also it was a difficult decision for us. We've always tried to make it as unpolitical as possible. For us, this is industrial action. I mean, I can't close. I can't afford to. I can't go and march, on Westminster. I don't have a tractor. And so essentially for us, this is like, we're going to bar 404 people, and they can't go into the pub. So they can't then get those photo opportunities. Yeah. They can't then, go into a pub and, pull a pint or anything like that. And that's what we want to do. We just targeted action. And they have listened. Or we are hoping they have listened.
Yes. Well, we'll get on to whether we've actually seen any action yet. So Tequila Slammer number 1, we've discussed the business rates hike. I think you leaned into Tequila Slammer number 2 in regard to national insurance contributions going up for employers, which was the budget before last. We also discussed Tequila Slammer number 3, which is the VAT disparity. is tequila slammer number 4, and you have alluded to this when you talk about young people, the minimum wage increase. Because, of course, the other thing about the Labour government is they insist they're doing this because they need to raise living standards and they must be paying young people a living wage. Just tell us practically from a boss's point of view the impact of that, because I suppose theoretically it's great to be able to pay a pot washer as much money as possible, but the economies of scale dictate that you then need to put everyone's wages up, right, Andy?
Yeah, so I think you have a couple of things here, and this is really close to my heart. I mean, youth employment as well is a really close thing for me. And this is not just the Labour government, it is also the Tories, because let's be honest, that living wage has come up every year under them as well. But I don't think anybody really is noticing what the real problem it's created. So essentially, if I have an 18-year-old who comes into the pub and they want their first job, and they've not got any training whatsoever, and they haven't got any social skills, and they're normally speaking, their parent has come to me and said, look, it'd be really good if we can get my 16-year-old or my 18-year-old in, and can you get them to learn a bit of social skills and understand how to interact with people, because it's your first time you interact, right? If you go into any job, those social skills will set you up for life. But they're now being paid £12.41, but they're completely untrained. That used to be a really, really good supervisor wage, for someone who was really, really good trained. But what's happened is they're getting 7-8% pay rises, and then we're meant to then pass that on. It's meant to go up the richer scale to your managers, etc. But my managers are getting less than inflationary pay rises, 2.5%, 3%, because I can't afford to do it. And so the problem is actually the managers are getting annoyed because they're like, well, we're doing all the real big work. The great members of staff who you think are amazing and they're really, really good waitresses and waiters who have been with you for years and they're really highly trained are not getting very much more money. But your 18-year-olds and your 16-year-olds and your 17-year-olds, and that kind of 19, 20 are all just getting these enormous pay rises. And what's happened is it means that we're not employing them anymore. Yeah. And so all of that youth is not getting employed. And they've already had, we used to have a scheme where basically we would employ 15, 16-year-olds, and they would come in and we'd have 1 or 2 in every single restaurant. And they would, to a certain extent, cannon fodder. They would run around, they would bus tables, they would just, run food or whichever, but they would be learning and they would be social skills and stuff like that. We don't have any of them anymore. I mean, I think we have one, and that is a family member, it's my niece. And that's really, really problematic. They've already had COVID where they've had some real, issues, and they haven't had those social skills embedded into them, and now they're not getting it now. So you're going to have this workforce in a couple of years' time, because ultimately with hospitality, one, you'll either go into hospitality, and lots of them do, or you'll work until you're 18, 19, you'll go to university, you'll go off and do an accountancy degree or whichever, or you'll go and I've got people that travel the world on their cocktail bartender just because they wanted to go and do that. But none of that is happening, and it's a real issue.
Is there a potential for a tequila slammer number 5 in this?
I mean, there's a lot more tequila slammers.
I know. Well, you can name more if you like, although I'm getting drunk on the thought of it. But it's the inability to have even one tequila slammer if this measure is introduced to reduce the drink drive limit. So I don't know what you think about that, Andy.
It's idiotic.
Well, Scotland have done it. So this is about bringing down the level from, I believe it's 80 to 50, which would mean that you would be precluded, I think, from having 1 pint. You could go to a country pub, and we say this on behalf of the rural community, Tim.
Yes.
To which many Telegraph readers and viewers and listeners belong, who just want to amble to the local in their car for 1 pint, say hello to the locals there. Maybe they're, I don't know, haven't got a husband or wife anymore, or it's the only time of the day they go out. They now face, if this proposal goes through, being criminalised for having 1 pint, because 1 pint or 1 glass of wine would take them above that limit.
And some of those local pubs have diversified to becoming restaurants, etc., in order to attract more custom, in order to survive. But people might not think about driving out to a pub for lunch if they can't drink.
Yes, just one drink.
Just one drink.
So my other pub is a pub that is on one of those kind of, driving routes. And, it relies on people to come in and have food, have a pint, and they pass through. Now, actually, I've argued with my wife about this because she's very, very firm on the whole drink driving thing, and we don't want people drink driving, but having a pint, one pint, and driving doesn't seem like it's very unsafe. And do you not think it is government overreach when they're trying to basically say that? And then there's the other side of the coin that now we've gone through this whole motion of getting 0% in all of the pubs, and we've got 0% wines, we've got 0% champagne, we're sparkling, we've got 0% beers, we've got all of this stuff, and now and 0% gin, and now they're saying that they don't want 18-year-olds to have 0% alcohol because it's a pathway to drinking alcohol.
What? Who said that?
This is the government.
No, they have said that. Yes.
People completely
which is why it
insane.
should be encouraged. I mean, isn't it? I
No,
mean,
honestly.
So they're saying a 0% Heineken or a 0% Tanqueray
but
is
this
a
is
gateway drug.
No, because you're going into a pub.
Yeah, this is important because the government's not just doing this to raise money. It's not just doing this for safety. It's doing because it is a government of petty-minded Roundhead Puritans who hate alcohol and drinking and people having fun.
Yes.
And
They're socialists, and therefore they are allergic to fun.
Well, we've said that basically, you're not being able to have a pint in your rural pub will be a death knell. It will be. Then turning around to people and say don't go to pubs because that's a gateway to drinking, just seems even more idiotic. And all of this is with a myriad of more taxation that's coming down the line. So
Line up some other slammers. What have I missed?
what have you missed? So obviously you've got the alcohol duty that's come in, so that's put 4p on a pint. So then you're sitting there kind of going, well, if I'm making 14p, and now there's 4p extra in taxation on a pint through alcohol duty, do I pass that 4p on, which essentially to pass that on is another 16p on a pint? Do I take that 4p and reduce my profit by 14p to 10p in a pint? You know, that's just one. And, you know, and then you've also got all of the compliance pieces. You know, I mean, there's over the last 10 years, I would say you've had so much more compliance, so much more EHOs, environmental health. And that's not, and all of this stuff is good. You know, and this is the thing that I'm a fellow for the Institute of Hospitality, and you know, one of the big things that they're trying to do at the moment, which I absolutely support, is go for chartered status. So, you know, like a chartered accountant, you know, chartered hospitality. Yeah. You know, and I have basically been sitting there for over a decade, longer than that, saying that our industry needs to grow up. You know, if we want to be taken seriously, we need to be serious about what we're doing. And you know what? Hospitality 20 years ago to hospitality now is a whole different ballgame. You know, we are now one of the shining beacons of Europe in terms of hospitality. You know, there are so many good things. That's meant for lots of compliance. That's meant for PRS licenses for music. You know, we have to pay for that. You can't. You know, it's not just a Spotify playlist. You've got to pay for it. Yeah. You know, there's so many different things you've got to then put on, and essentially, you know, all of that costs money, and all of that is needed. But ultimately, when you're then getting to a situation where you've got no profit, you've got nothing left to give, then you're then looking at that kind of stuff, and you're saying, well, now we're going back the other way. We've sat there for years, and I pride myself on, you know, on our company, where we sit there and we say, look, we don't want you to do any more than 45 to 48 hours. You can do it if you want to. You know, if you want the money, that's fine. But we would like you to do 45 to 48 hours. We'd like you to have 2 clear days off. You know, we've got non-negotiables, so we say we would like you to pick your non-negotiable. So if you've got a book club on a Wednesday, we want you to put that in as a book club on a Wednesday. I never work Wednesday nights because I go to book club. You know, whichever. I mean, it could be any different club. But that's us growing up. You know, it's gone are the days where you're working 90, 80, 70 hours a week. You know, we're not slave drivers. But all of that costs money. And we generate 60 billion in taxation. Actually, I think the new figure is 66 billion in taxation to UK PLC. We're not saying we don't want to pay tax. We do pay, and we pay a lot of tax. What we're saying is that we should be able to make a little bit of profit. And that is where we're at the moment.
Is there any political party right now that you would trust with hospitality? I mean, Nigel Farage likes a pint.
Nigel Farage does like a pint. And ultimately, you know, they haven't actually set out to a certain extent what their policy is on VAT. However, the Liberal Democrats, they have set out their policy on VAT. They're going to cut VAT. Actually, a big supporter for down here is Vicky Slade. She then got me in contact with Daisy Cooper. We then basically said, look, forget about the rates, forget about all the other taxation, cut VAT, and we'll deal with the rest, because we'll make it work. And so they've said, we'll bring it down to 15%. We'll obviously want 13%, so it's a little bit, but it's still good that they've done it. The Conservatives, they're going to scrap rates altogether. And she's also very supportive of the VAT piece as well. So we've actually just sent over a Treasury paper to the Kemi's office to say, look, this is why we want 13%. This is what we think it will do. Because also, the VAT rate is not essentially a tax cut because it self-generates. So through the growth, in 5 or 6 years, you wouldn't even, it's not a tax cut.
Yeah, be more money coming in.
And ultimately, if you look at I think it's over £1 billion that's currently owed in taxation by hospitality that's unpaid. So you add those things in, it brings down that ask quite a lot.
Yeah.
On that theme, we've got some questions from a dozen or so Telegraph readers who have joined us in the Goodyards today. And the first question comes from Jackie Cox.
Which party in the next election do you think is best placed to support pubs, farms, small businesses to help them recover from Labour?
What's the answer to that?
I don't know. We have to be completely non-partisan. But at the moment, it is clear that the party not to support is Labour, because I agree with your analysis of the puritanical approach to this. Also, one gets the impression increasingly from Labour that they're just bicycles sort of riding urbanites who don't understand rural communities, don't understand people who get in cars to go to pubs for lunch, don't understand the hospitality industry because none of them have ever run a small business in their lives. So it's hard. I didn't know that about the Lib Dems leaning into the VAT cut, but then
they're quite clever at this sort of thing.
But to be fair, they came out straight away. They were off the back. But I mean, I'm not saying I would like a party to support that actually says what they're going to do. We've not had a party in power for a very, very long time who has actually gone and done what they said they're going to do. There was lots of people that supported Labour in the last election. Especially in hospitality, because they said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They didn't do any of it, and they've done the exact opposite. And ultimately, I think a lot of people are politically homeless at the moment.
Yeah. What I'm interested in is you don't seem to be leaning into the Conservatives, even though you could argue during COVID, Rishi Sunak, furlough, loans, etc., might have helped your industry, but you haven't forgiven them for clobbering you over the course of the last 14 years.
I haven't forgiven them for clobbering us over the last 14 years, but I think also it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because I think the Conservatives are actually, getting their act together. I think all of the political parties are, trying to figure out, where the new lay of the land is. But ultimately, you're in a situation where people like Kemi, is using the Labour MP campaign to clobber Keir Starmer, and has been in PMQs, and she's used it loads of times. But I really want to see some meat on the bone, and I want people to listen to us. And ultimately, I don't think anybody's listening to us. And one of the reasons I'm not going to go into the political of who I think or whatever is because I think that politicises what we've done.
Yeah.
And the No Labour MP campaign is political enough, but what I've tried to do, and I keep on trying to do, and I'm going to continue doing, is bringing it back to this is industrial action. It's not about political party. It's about the government of the day.
Yeah.
The government of the day have put in taxation that basically we cannot afford to pay. And the government of the day now must listen to us, and they must turn around and say, okay, we got it wrong in the first instance on rate reform. But then look at the Treasury papers. Look at the papers we've created. We've had our local university do the paper, run the figures.
Yeah.
Just look at it. It makes perfect sense. To any normal human being, it makes perfect sense.
It begs the question. I mean, she did the review over Christmas, and you have to ask yourself, why didn't you do that review and work out the numbers before you announced them in the budget?
Well, and also, who's going to resign over that?
Yeah.
Is it going to be Rachel Reeves because she's lied, or is it going to be the VOA office because they're lied?
Can we have a question from Martin Wright?
How do you run a pub in the summer when it rains?
So, incredibly difficultly. No, I mean, I suppose we've got a number of different pubs. So the one we're sitting in right now is incredibly difficult to run in the summer, incredibly busy in the winter. You've got the warm fires, but in the summer it's very, 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 very difficult. And ultimately, we've also got another pub that is incredibly good in the summer, but in very, very bad in the winter. So having that breadth of, you know, being able to have transfer staff from different places is really important. We've then got another pub, which is the Old Fat, which is our award-winning pub. That is busy all year round. And the reason that's busy all year round is because we've reinvested into our outside spaces. We are a very big family pub, so we've got family spaces. You've also then got a really, really big inside space, so you've got fires and all that kind of stuff. So everything basically is worked around to being a year-round pub, and that is the key to a successful pub. And you know, this one here, for example, the Good Yard, it's very, very difficult. You run on a skeleton crew. You don't have you try to keep your outgoings as small as possible, but you're still paying your rent, you're still paying your rates, you still pay exactly the same amount of money in the summer as you do in the winter. So it's very difficult. For me, we try to spread that out. So we try to have 1 or 2 pubs, which we can basically move staff around. We move kitchen teams from one to the other to try and basically, you know, balance it out. But ultimately, it's a very difficult. So we've got another pub that is over in Corfe Castle, a sister pub of ours, and they do an enormous trade in the summer. I mean, for the 6 to 7, 8 weeks of the summer, it is absolutely amazing, and then they drop to basically nothing, and that. Trying to go between those things is incredibly difficult. And this is, again, where the taxation system doesn't work, because you've got rates that basically are every single month. Nothing changes. And then you know, and so you're basically making money in the summer, losing it in the winter, and you get to zero again. And so what we've done, and this is why we're successful, is we've toggled those things. But again, you know, some of our pubs make an enormous amount of money, and they don't make any profit.
And Andy, can I ask, how much of the industry's problems are really down to the government, or to the English just not going to the pub so much anymore?
It's a good question. For me, and I can only talk about our own experience, we don't believe that's anything to do with people not wanting to go to the pub. Actually, we're very busy. You know, if you take the Old Fat, it's a very, very busy pub.
But there used to be a pub on every street corner where I grew up, and now there's 1 or 2.
And because, you know, and there's going to be less and less. You know, you mentioned 1 in 6 pubs, or 1 pub every day. It's 6 hospitality venues every day. Wow. That's what's closing. And ultimately, those pubs that haven't developed their offering, you know, they've gone. And ultimately, no one's saying that basically business shouldn't fail, because businesses should fail if they don't, you know, reinvest and they don't change and they don't. But what I'm saying is that if my pub is an award-winning pub, and, you know, being voted Dorset's best pub, and I do 400 roasts on a Sunday, every week, every month, and we turn over about 1.6 million, but I only make 50 grand. Is that my fault, or is that someone else's fault? So, for example, next year, in one of my pubs, I've got to redo the thatch. I've got to put that in 2 years in advance, £75,000 to do it. If that pub only made £50,000, where does the money come from? Will I borrow it? Yeah. And then there's another one, there's your tequila slammer number 100. Interest rates. You know, it's unbelievable that basically in our industry, the interest rates are triple what interest rates are in other industries. Because there's such a high turnover of hospitality businesses at the moment, you're in a situation where basically nobody wants to lend to you. So when they do lend to you, they lend to you at incredibly ridiculous interest rates. I mean, not that we're taking it, but I had a quote yesterday, and I can prove it as well, from a company, and the interest rate was 59%.
Good grief.
59%.
Wow.
Obviously, we turned around and said no.
That's like drug dealer rate.
Yes.
That is drug. Yeah.
That is like a loan shark.
That's pay or you lose your knees.
Yes, exactly.
And so obviously you're saying no, but you know, but then go down to that. You know, we've got government backed from, you know, I'm not going to go into names, but government backed, so fully guaranteed loans at 15, 16, 17%. Why is that? That's a fully government backed. So that's basically full security. But because it's our industry, they're like, well, no, we'll do it at 14, 15, 16, 17%. When most people are 3 or 4% above base. It's mad, and we've been trying to campaign on that for years, saying, look, if you guys could lend to us, because everyone borrows, everyone has to borrow to expand, everyone has to borrow to do whatever they want to do at normal rates, then we would then have more cash flow coverage, etc., and stuff like that. And if a government-backed loan is going to be, and that's an old C-bills, is 15%. That's crazy.
I was just thinking we hadn't even touched on tequila, slammer, number whatever, which is energy prices, which I would imagine have been very difficult for pubs. But let's not get started. In a way, Andy, we have to leave it there. But thank you very much to you. Good luck with this business, which we will be promoting on this Daily Tea special. Thank you to all of the punters.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Continue drinking. And coming up next, we're going to be speaking to the celebrity chef and hospitality boss, Tom Kerridge, who's going to tell us how he has almost been driven to closing his business because of the last budget. Tom Kerridge, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We've spoken to Andy Lennox, who maybe is a kind of different end of the hospitality industry in a way. I mean, he runs pubs down in Dorset. Just remind our audience, what different establishments are you now running in the UK?
So I have 5 different sites, 3 pubs that are based in Marlow, 1 pub in Chelsea, West London, and 1 restaurant that's in Whitehall, just round the corner from number 10, Downing Street, funnily enough. So, but all sites are slightly different. The 3 pubs in Marlow, 1 is a 2 Michelin star venue that's been open for 20 years. 1 is a singular Michelin star venue that's been open for 10 years, that is a little bit more relaxed in terms of its counter bar seating and quite an eclectic and varied menu. And the other one is a burger, steaks and kind of fries kind of place with the sport that's on the telly and is all about being a local boozer. The Chelsea site is a kind of like a food-led, almost kind of, I suppose, gastro pub style West London pub, which has great footfall just off the King's Road. And then the main restaurant in the centre of Whitehall is a kind of like a 90 cover British brasserie is the best way of describing it.
Wow. And how is the business in general doing, not least in light of the last budget?
Business is across sites down percentages, probably around about 15% down on last January, which is a bit of an issue in terms of revenue and understanding how to move forward. There is some spend out there. There is some movement. I think some people, particularly consumer that have a big disposable income, are still coming out for something to eat and entertainment. Corporate, the spend is down, but they are still entertaining in a way, but the revenues are not the same. And January is a little bit of a struggle this year because Christmas wasn't as good as expected. So normally Christmas would run for the whole of December, and hospitality, generates most of its money through that December period to get us through the kind of January and February period. Although Christmas probably was down around about 20%, I think that there was a shorter period of people going out and spending and enjoying the festivities. So it's a difficult space right now for the whole of hospitality.
I mean, what you're saying is very much echoing what Andy said. And the killer stat for us from him, Tim, wasn't it, was that he has a £1.5 million turnover, but he's very lucky if he can make more than 50 grand profit. And those profit margins are being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And of course, also making that reference to how little of the pint he sells he actually makes on that drink. So basically saying that he made 14p on every pint. Now, he's taken a very aggressive stance against the government. He's banning Labour MPs. I know, Tom, that you are a Labour supporter. You remain one, even though I assume you're highly critical of the Chancellor Rachel Reeves over all this.
Yeah, I mean, you can be supportive of a party and its fundamental politics without having to be 100% behind every particular policy that they make. And, I think the understanding about hospitality and the way that the business works is one that I think Rachel Reeves and this position that they're in at the minute is one that shows a non-understanding of hospitality and the way that it operates. So, yeah, in terms of the business rates and the business rates movement and the way that that's going, that's the fact that they've been listened to, the fact that, I was quite fortunate to be able to get in and speak to Peter Keir before Christmas. I caught up with him at a drinks party kind of like some sort of gathering where he was there, and I kind of ambushed him and said, listen, we need to have a conversation regarding the business rates and moving forward, because what's happened post-budget has been incredibly unhelpful for hospitality. In fact, we were looking for a bit more of a break. I know hospitality in general is calling for a VAT that sits like the rest of Europe. And we were hoping for some sort of movement with that regard in the budget. And in fact, the opposite came through with the business rates repositioning. So I was able to have a conversation with him pre-Christmas and kind of thought that it might fall on deaf ears, and it might be one of those tick box processes of saying that they've spoke to somebody from the industry. And however, on the 5th of January, I was in Peter Curl's office having a conversation face to face with him, where he presented to me my business rates increase and what it's going to be. He had done the research, his team had been there and said, listen, and I sat there and said, these figures are completely unsustainable. You talk about your previous guest there that, they have an £50,000 profit if they are lucky on a £1.5 million turnover. One of my pubs it sits there with around about a similar sort of turnover, perhaps just a little bit more, but it is just a small boozer. And my business rates have gone up £75,000. So if you are operating on a business model that might make £50,000 and your business rates suddenly go to £75,000, if you're a pub owner operator, what's the point in doing it? You're straight away being taken into a deficit. So that conversation I had with Peter Curl, and then it turned into a little bit more. I think what it does is allow him to then approach Rachel Reeves and say, listen, this is the situation. This is the numbers that we're talking about here. So I'm sure, like every Secretary of State, that, they all want to do well, no matter previous government, this government, no matter which politician, which Secretary of State it is, they want to do the best for the ministry that they're representing, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's business and trade. But I think they can only do that once they get some sort of movement with the purse strings, and it comes from the Treasury. So I think the more ammunition that they have to go and see Rachel Reeves and say, listen, this is what has to happen. We need to have some movement here. Which has meant that I think in turn there's been some form of business rates U-turn. However, we're still to see what the detail is. And at the minute, it just sits with just pubs. But it's not just pubs, it's the whole of hospitality, because the difference between a pub and a restaurant these days is very, very, it's marginal. Mm-hmm. Most pubs operate as food-led spaces because that's the only way that they can kind of generate monetary value all the way through and operate as a business. So, that business rates reversal needs to be looked at across the whole of hospitality.
Tom, it's not just about tax, it's also about another policy which is very close to the heart of the Labour Party, which is employment rights and pay. And I'm sure you love your workers. You've also got to be able to afford to employ them. With the living wage going up, but also with the new employee rights coming in, is the government hitting hospitality very hard from that angle too?
Yeah, hospitality gets hit massively. I mean, it is a kind of a low pay industry because it doesn't make any money. It's run by people that operate on passion. When you open small businesses and small pubs and little restaurants or coffee shops, it's done by people who live a life in hospitality and absolutely love it. The margins are absolutely tiny and marginal, and you do it because you thoroughly enjoy it. I think, listen, every good employer, no matter what industry you're in, whether it's tech, whether it's AI, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's healthcare or whether it's construction or hospitality, every good business success is dependent on a workforce. That workforce's ability to buy houses, have access to great education, healthcare, all of those sort of things are incredibly important. Without a workforce that is able to live, maintain, and enjoy, their lives, your business is not going to prosper. So being able to minimum wage, I completely understand and I completely get. It's a cross between. That isn't the biggest policy that is killing off hospitality. It is, there are 5 different issues. I think it is minimum wage, it is NI, it is business rates. It is also food inflation. It is also utility bills. It is also, VAT. Now, all of those things as a combination, they then add huge amount of pressure into the business. And so every single point needs to be looked at.
With that in mind, just to conclude, Tom Kerridge, as you're used to designing menus, give us a starter, a main course and a dessert of options you want to put to the government to change policy. What would be on your menu as suggestions to Rachel Reeves as to how to improve the situation for hospitality owners like you?
To be honest, it's one big lot dumped into the table in the middle of it. The biggest thing that would help hospitality is a difference in VAT. It's a front-end tax that makes an opportunity for hospitality to exist, to be able to make a profit. Now, profit doesn't mean that business owners just start making more money. What it does is it means it gives growth, it gives reinvestment, it allows education, it allows proper wages, it allows more staff, it allows all of those sort of things that every business needs. Hospitality is such a funny business that, people think that if a hospitality business makes a profit, it's a bad thing. If a young British businessman opens a tech business with a government funded grant for £20,000 and 10 years later sells his AI company for $2 billion, everyone applauds it and thinks it's amazing. Those profit hospitality has to operate the same as every business, because so many different things happen behind the scenes in terms of, like, there's always something broken, there's always something that needs reinvested, there's always a boiler that needs fixing, and they can only become repaired. Places can only grow if it operates with an operational profit. If it breaks even or goes, but it sits stagnant, and stagnant means that things start going backwards. The problem when it doesn't operate and make money is businesses then start looking at cutting costs. When you start looking at cutting costs, things start becoming de-skilled, and it ends up being this kind of race to the bottom. Product starts getting used, is cheaper, and all of those sort of things. Now, whether it's Michelin star restaurants or whether it's just high street chains, the moment that you start looking at cutting costs, everything starts going backwards and backwards and backwards. Places start closing, and the operational skill sets and the levels of understanding of what happens in hospitality, it all disappears. Now, hospitality is one of the most important and incredible employers in the country. It has over 3 million people that are employed in it frontline, but also it's one of the most important regards to young adults and their movement into further, not only just further education, but into becoming different areas of where they go into society. If you think of most people, no matter what age they are, they would have worked in hospitality at some point from the ages of 15 and 16, whether they're washing up or part-time waitresses and waiters, or whether they're working behind a bar at a student union, all of those sort of things. Hospitality is so vitally important for young adults' growth and being able to connect. Most people, young adults, their conversation is normally amongst their peers, and the only kind of adult conversation they have is with their parents or their parents' friends, or whether it's lecturers or teachers. To actually be into the real world of hospitality, they have an opportunity to understand that it embraces all walks of life, and the world is such a huge and amazing and vast place, and hospitality has all of those people within it. So it's such a vital part of, I suppose, the bigger picture of the country, of the way that people move forward, what they learn, and they're able to interact with each other.
Tom, the VAT rate in this country is 20%. In Norway, it is, I think, 5%. In Ireland, it's 9%. What do you think our VAT rate should be? What's the ideal rate for someone in your business?
Listen, I think across hospitality, we would love it to sit at around about 10%. That 10% margin makes a big difference to us to be able to operate. If you think most businesses right now, hospitality businesses are making a loss or breaking even, I mean, a 10% difference in revenue that comes back into the business allows it to operate as a profit, allows small growth. It's green shoot. So a 10% VAT rate would be ideal for the business.
Tom Kerridge, we know you've got a busy day ahead. We can see staff bustling around behind you. So thank you very much indeed for your time on the Daily Tea. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying our journalism, why not sign up to From the Editor, our free email newsletter? Start your day with the latest news and opinion, plus our bite-sized puzzles. Scan the QR code to sign up free today.